Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
And all across the fantasy universe, welcome in. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. I'm your host, Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always by the analytical assassin. He's Dwayne McFarland. You read all his great work at Pro Football Focus and at Establish the Run. And right here on the Fantasy Football Hustle, you get all his takes. And what you can't do at those places is ask him a direct question. But if you're in our chat room on YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, whatever, you can. So it pays to be with us live here every Tuesday night at 10 o'clock, or you can talk to Dwayne and I. Welcome to all the folks who are in the chat room already. If you're not following us on Twitter, the show is at FF Hustle. I'm at Drake Fantasy. And of course, you all know Dwayne is at Dwayne McFarland. How are you, my friend? Happy Thanksgiving week. We got a little triple header coming up in a few days, COVID pending.
Yeah, man. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. I'm excited for football. I'm excited because in the FFPC, a lot of the listeners, we walked them through a draft and stuff. Earlier this year, we did a lot of draft shows around the FFPC format. So 12 out of 21 teams have made the playoffs. I thought it was going to be around 70%, like as of 2 weeks ago. But with COVID and everything going on, I think 57%. I'll take it, man. It's pretty good. Any year you get over half your teams in a format like this against really tough competition is good. Like I've gotten up close to 70% before, but that's really hard to do. So almost 60%. I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, man. You know what else we're happy about? In the Scott Fish Bowl, 1,440 teams are in the Scott Fish Bowl. Every expert you've ever heard of, from ESPN to Yahoo to CBS to whatever site you follow online. You got two guys here in the top 100, and somebody it's in the top 10. Just toot my own hair right there.
It's not me.
Yeah. Toot, as Arn Anderson would say. So yeah, hopefully we can bring home a title there, and we want to bring you guys home some titles this week, and that's what this show is all about. It's the playoff push. We got 2 weeks left in most regular seasons. You've got week 12, you got week 13, and then boom, we're into the dance. So what we want to do tonight, go over some players that you're going to want to make sure are on your rosters, and maybe some guys who are off your rosters, so we can get those W's, get you into the dance, and get a trophy, get a belt, get the cash, and the bragging rights. So let's start at the quarterback position, Dwayne. And my first guy, and he should have been the first guy last week, was Taysom Hill. 18 of 24 this past week for 233 yards. It may not have been pretty, but what he gave you especially was that rushing upside. 10 for 51 and 2, count them, 2 scores on the ground. His next 3 opponents are at Denver, at Atlanta, and at Philadelphia, which Drew Brees could possibly be back for, but he's got like 8,000 cracked ribs, so who knows about all that. But what are your thoughts on Taysom Hill and what he's doing to this offense? Because we saw Alvin Kamara not catch a pass. But, hey, Michael Thomas was back.
Yeah. Well, as far as Taysom Hill himself goes, we've seen what Tim Tebow can do, right? Tim Tebow was, a quarterback 1 whenever he played. Heck, think back to when Terrell Pryor was playing quarterback for the Raiders. Right? He was a quarterback 1. Like most weeks he started. If you have a quarterback that's going to run for 50 to 60 yards and give you a rushing touchdown every week with upside for 2, and then even if they only throw for 175 yards and 1 passing touchdown, and even if they throw a pick, they're going to be in the top 12 quarterbacks. It's not quite like it was when Tebow was here, because back then we didn't have all these high-level guys that could rush and hit all the big passing statistics. So it's tough for him to be like in the top 4 or 5 or 6 consistently each week. But yeah, Taysom Hill can be a top 12 quarterback every week that he plays just because of his legs alone. As far as what it does with the offense, you hit on the 2 key players. Mike Thomas, a lot of it is he's just finally healthy, right? And, he's worked his way back in to the good graces of the coaching staff. Everything's working properly with his body. It's just been a rough season for Mike Thomas. Does it get any rougher? You get injured week 1 right out of the gate, or maybe it was week 2 where he got the high ankle sprain, whichever week they played Tampa. that was whenever the high ankle sprain came. Then trying to come back, you have another injury. Then you get in a fight with a teammate. It's been a rough year for Mike Thomas. But yeah, he came back in a big way this week with 10 targets. I anticipate, given the range of the field that he operates, they're going to keep doing that. And he's the kind of guy, Drake, that as long as he keeps getting those targets, it's probably not going to make a big difference between Drew Brees and Taysom Hill, right? Because his targets just are what they are. They're in that 7 to 10 yard range. He's really more of a possession receiver. The biggest thing that it would hurt, right, is if suddenly the Saints just can't score as many points because they can't keep drives going, right? Then that could hurt his upside and touchdowns. The biggest guy that gets impacted is who you already named, and it's Alvin Kamara. And I'm pretty concerned. I was just on the pod earlier with Ian Harsitz at PFF, and this was one of the questions he asked me. He's like, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your concern around Alvin Kamara? And I'm not on like a full-on panic mode because it's only one data point. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I've told him, I'm like at that 7-8 range. I know, again, only one data point, but think about how often Alvin Kamara gets designed looks, right? These plays that are specifically created just for him. That's what worries me, because Sean Payton could have still dialed all those things up. So there's something schematically that the way they're looking at the offense now, and it may have just been the matchup, right, with the Falcons. And if you guys hear that rumbling, yeah, it's like pouring here. So I have thunder, lightning, all that. If you guys lose me, I'll dial in on the cell. But that was the biggest thing for me, Drake. I was like, man, I thought I'd still see the screenplays designed, some of the angle routes, some of the smoke screen, where they'll run him outside, out wide, out by like 2 tight ends and throw him a screen pass, those kind of things. You didn't see any of that. And that was the most concerning thing because, typically Kamara's, he's a first read. His first read targets are about 60% of his targets, which is huge for running backs, right? They're usually check downs. They're usually like 37% is the league average. So I thought we would still get those and see maybe 4 or 5 targets, maybe just not have the upside for 8 or 9, but to only have 1. Yeah, man, I'm really concerned because if you only get 10 to 12 carries, and if you're only getting, say, 2 to 4 targets, man, Alvin Kamara is not an RB1 lock every week anymore. Now, again, not going to panic, not saying go dump Alvin Kamara, not saying don't start Alvin Kamara. We're going to have to see what happens this next week. But we have talked about it in the past on the show. We've had multiple really good analysts in the fantasy community actually pointed out, right, the problem that can occur with running quarterbacks and how they don't, pass the ball to the running back. Yep. I was hoping that would be a little different because of all the design looks Kamara gets, but right now it doesn't look good, Drake.
No, 13 for 45 on the ground and a score. If he doesn't get that score, he scores you 6.5 points in a PPR. That's not exactly what you're looking for from Alvin Kamara. And, we're talking quarterback here. And if you don't have a backup quarterback as we go into the playoffs, Dwayne, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially in this COVID world that we're in. Do you want to roll in? You're in your home league with your buddies or whatever you're playing in that our listeners have. Do you want to have a backup quarterback at this point, or are you still letting the waiver wire be your backup?
I mean, it depends on how your waiver wires work, right? Does it lock players after a certain week when they get dropped, like a lot of these national contests work? A lot of home leagues don't do that. No. But if all of a sudden it's dwindling, right? Every time somebody gets dropped, they're no longer somebody you can add back, then I'm carrying 3. So on almost all my FFPC teams, I'm carrying 3 now. I had to make some tough cuts. I did pick up Taysom Hill several times last week, sometimes just because I saw a guy that I was battling with to get into the playoffs needed a quarterback, and he had like $2 in blind bidding money left. So I literally put $3 on all 4 available quarterbacks that were remaining. Nice. And then so that's kind of a side point. But yeah, in that kind of format, I'm carrying 2 or 3. If I'm in a home league, again, it depends on the size. If I'm in a really large league, say 12 team with deep benches, or in a 14 plus teamer, I'm going to carry 2 no matter what, mm-hmm. right? If I am in a 10-person shallow bench, 8-person, doesn't really matter if it's deep or shallow, and 8 people leagues. In those formats, I'm a little more willing, right, to just carry 1 and be able to pick 1 up at the last minute if I need to because of COVID-19 or whatever happens. So you just kind of got to look at the wire. You guys know your leagues better than we do. But the larger they are typically, right, the more I'm going to just go ahead and carry.
You had a great point there, and it's blocking your opponent. So if you're in a race here to make the playoffs, say you're like the 5 seed or the 6 and you're battling, look at those other guys. You know, are they without a QB? Can you pick up a guy? Can you pick up 2? Block these guys, you know, play a little defense. And that's what we're talking about here with these QBs. The next guy we're going to talk about has 0 rushing upside, unlike Taysom Hill, and that's Kirk Cousins. But he does have 8 touchdown passes the last 3 games. But the big issue here, possibly no Adam Thielen. We've got reports that he had a past COVID or a positive COVID test and a negative COVID test this week. So we have no clue if we're going to see Thielen this weekend at all. The next 3 for Cousins are Carolina, Jacksonville, and then starts the fantasy playoffs at Tampa Bay. He's got 30 plus attempts in the last 2 weeks. When Kirk is above 30 attempts, he's going to come through for you. Thoughts on this? Let's get your whole world here of Vikings here. The situation with Thielen, and if he's out, who would you go after? Who might get a bump? Everything to do with the Vikes.
Yeah, if Thielen is out, we'll start there. I think Irv Smith, who seems to be recovering from the groin injury. Before that injury, he had worked his way up into the 70 and 80% route run rate. And really, he had kind of just really relegated, Kyle Rudolph to being just more of the blocker, right? Rudolph was still running routes, et cetera, but Irv Smith was really the main guy. So as long as his groin is 100%, I would say he's the guy that I'm looking at versus BC Johnson, BB, some of these other guys that they have. I would definitely be leaning towards Irv Smith. I think that Dalvin Cook would also pick up a little bit more in the passing game if that were to be the case. Hopefully it was a false positive, given that he's had 1 negative and 1 positive test, because Thielen's on a real tear. He's got 6 end zone targets over the last 3 games. He seemingly catches all of them for touchdowns, no matter how hard. I mean, he's got 3 pretty ridiculous touchdown catches in the span of like 3 weeks. Last week, CeeDee Lamb made that great adjustment on the ball, caught it and, where he had to turn back and he fell on his back, he was kind of turned around, and then Thielen just comes right back, like 2 drives later, and he one-ups him with a one-handed catch in the back right corner of the end zone, which was just fabulous. So hopefully Thielen's okay, but obviously Justin Jefferson moves into the top 12. Justin Jefferson has top 12 upside no matter what. Mm-hmm. But if you take Adam Thielen away, I think he's a lock for top 12. You know what I mean? I mean, he's just with the play action game that they have going, you got to worry about Dalvin Cook. If they can just get one other weapon kind of working, right, it'll be enough to keep Justin Jefferson from facing too much coverage. As far as Kirk Cousins goes, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head, Drake. It's like when he gets to that 35, 40, drop back range, where he can throw somewhere around 30 passes, you're okay. If you're in the weeks like week 9 and 8, where they only dropped back 18 and 22 times, it doesn't matter how good you are or how efficient you are, right? Those are just going to be problematic weeks. But if you look at the full body of work, here are the dropbacks for the Vikings: 32, 33, 32, 27, 44, 43. Those 2 weeks we just talked about, which were really low, and then 39 and 35. So on most weeks, Cousins is going to be in that 28 to 32 attempt range. You're going to get the outlier, right? It's just kind of wild, and you kind of got to live with that. But as long as Thielen's active, yeah, man, I think Cousins, I don't put him squarely. I think he's a fringe QB1, depending on his matchup. When he gets, just like what you said, when he gets the right matchup, you're fine. I mean, he's sitting at QB 16 right now. He's averaging 19.4 points per game. So yeah, I think he's fine. Sorry, that was actually, I was looking at projections on that. I don't know what he is for the season. You may have it in front of you, but I was looking at the wrong thing. But anyway, I think he's a fringe QB1 each week. It just does depend on the matchup. But their offense is rolling really well right now.
A couple other guys, if you're looking for some depth at the quarterback position, Derek Carr. This is based on schedule. He's at the Falcons this week, and then he's at the Jets. It doesn't get much better than that. And Daniel Jones of the Giants, his next few games are at Cincinnati, which they could probably win now because of the Joe Burrow situation. We'll get to that. At Seattle, and then home for Arizona and Cleveland. So some shootout potential for Daniel Jones. He only has 2 games under 30 attempts, and he's got all this rushing upside. So a couple other guys, I don't know if you have any thoughts on them, Dwayne, but I just want to throw them in if someone's looking for
Carr has the same problem Cousins does, right? He has a coach that's very willing to actually just would prefer to just run the ball every down if he could.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, here are the drop back rates for Derek Carr over the last 4 weeks: 43%, 52%, 43%, and then last week 58%. So you really need a good opponent on the other side of the Raiders. And the games where it's not like Justin Herbert, right, where it doesn't matter who he plays, his defense is bad enough to keep pretty much any other offense in the game. You just don't have that with Vegas. And it's not like their defense is really good, but the ball control style that Gruden wants to run, the play action that he wants to set up, he likes to run a lot of 12 and 21 packages. I don't think any team in the NFL outside of Shanahan and then what you see in Minnesota, there was one other one, maybe Green Bay. They don't do it quite as often, but I mean, Vegas uses a fullback a ton. So it's a team that does want to run the ball. So you got to be careful of that. You just got to watch that. And Danny Dimes would, his thing is you're just worried about, the turnovers and the pickoffs, the self-implosion stuff, right? But the attempts are typically going to be there. The Giants aren't a very good team, so most games should be competitive. Now this week, maybe won't be competitive because you're facing Ryan Finley, probably Ryan Finley, but if not, it would be Brandon. Is it Brandon Allen? Is that who they brought up from the practice squad? Yeah, Brandon Allen is who they brought up, which tomato on that one.
Be Tim Allen for all we care. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We'll get into that in a minute, though. It does matter for our guy T. Higgins. So I would just say Carr, just watch the matchup just like you would, with Minnesota. Preferably if you're carrying two guys like that, you're just playing whoever is in the matchup that's more likely to be a shootout.
Let's go over to running back now, and
Cousins is QB 18. Sorry, I think I said 16 a minute ago. So sorry.
That's all right. We're going to switch gears now to running back. If you got some money left on the wire and you need a running back, and don't we all, I think the conversation this week starts with Gus Edwards because J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram both tested positive for COVID-19. And boy, oh boy, Dobbins is looking like he was taking over, Dwayne. 63% snap share week 11, but he's out this week. And now this is something maybe people don't think about. They play again next Thursday against the Cowboys. So with this 10-day protocol, you really could be without J.K. Dobbins for 2 games this week and next week. So yikes. Gus the Bus isn't a total 0. In week 6 through 9, he handled double-digit carries, including week 8 versus the Steelers, who they play Thursday, when he rumbled 16 times for 87 yards and a score. Justice Hill's there also. Love to get your thoughts on him. But would you agree Gus Edwards, probably top running back ad of the week in a tough matchup?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking to fill anybody in, I mean, Gus is going to be the guy that comes to the top of the list. So, I mean, if you get to be the main back in the Ravens offense, meaning you get 50 to 60% of the carries, you're going to have RB1 upside. I expect to see Justice Hill on the field plenty and long down and distance. I would guess that Justice Hill will handle all of the 2-minute work. He was already starting to do some of that last week. The thing with Dobbins sucks, man. It sucks so bad. It's just like the DeAndre Swift, right? You get the breakout, all the utilization is there, concussion in practice. Like, really? Like, okay, thanks 2020. And then now you get this with Dobbins. Man, I really hope he doesn't miss 2 weeks, but it just sucks because he had hit the 60% snap mark multiple times before. Mm-hmm. It was all of the other underlying stuff, right? When you look at what Dobbins was getting, last week from a standpoint, one of the things I really like to look at, Drake, is I'll go look at, the first down snaps. He had 68% of the first down snaps. He was seeing some long down and distance. What's funny is his long down and distance work has gone down, which used to be his only role. But he dominated, from a carry standpoint. He dominated from a first down snap standpoint. He dominated the short down and distance. He had five snaps from the slot. They're moving him around. He had 100% of the 2-minute work. So it was just it's terrible timing for J.K. Mm-hmm. Dobbins, because I think you were about to have a high-end RB2 with RB1 upside every single week on your hands, and now. So hopefully it's not 2 weeks with Dobbins. And yes, so Edwards is, if you just need a guy to get you through this week, Edwards, depending on how deep your league is, Edwards probably is the best option to get you through the week. And as Drake said, maybe the week after.
An old favorite coming back to life here, and it's James White. He's owned in 41% of Yahoo leagues, and I drunkenly at my home league draft called him the White Christian McCaffrey because he's playing with Cam Newton this year in New England, but he hasn't done anything this year. But Rex Burkhead is now on IR. So last week, you look at James White, he's in there, 9 targets, 6 catches for 64, also had 5 rushing attempts. Here's the best part about it. We know that offense is terrible, but they could be in shootouts the next 3 weeks at home against Arizona, and then they get the Chargers and the Rams, 3 teams who can all put points on the board and allow some points too. So I think James White has major upside here going forward for the Pats.
Yeah, we'll have to see. My gut says they'll just plug Sony Michel into Rex Burkhead's role. Michel was really more, wasn't really known as a 2-down banger when he was in Georgia, right? When he was at Georgia, that was really Nick Chubb had that role. And, you had Sony Michel who would work, at a lot of the long down and distance, he would get a lot of the third down work, he caught, some balls. So we'll see what they do. My guess is Michel takes over Burkhead's role and it stays muddy. But to your point, we'll see. James White played 57% of the snaps, had 22% of the targets. With Burkhead out, if Michel doesn't become part of the picture, it really could expand James White and Damian Harris's roles, right? Damian Harris's problem, hasn't been how well he's been playing. It's just been the fact that if the Patriots are trailing, he's cooked, And if you look at the last 3 weeks, he only plays 32% of the snaps when the team's down by more than 3 points, right? So that's bad. That just puts you in a situation where any game you could just be completely erased. And we've talked about it before. That puts you in the 8 to 10 attempt range with no targets, no touchdowns. You basically have a guy that's going to give you 4 or 5 points. And that's the problem for Damian Harris. So we'll have to see. I do think White is worth adding. I think if you're in a really deep league, Sony Michel is also worth adding. So if you were in a league where carrying Rex Burkhead was a thing, that's kind of your rule of thumb. If you were in a league where Rex Burkhead was just sitting out there as a free agent still, don't worry about Sony Michel. But if you were in one of those leagues where Rex Burkhead was carried, then Sony Michel is worth having on your roster, obviously depending on who you would be cutting.
Let's hit a couple of quick questions here from our chat room. We like to say we got the smartest chat room in fantasy. So let's throw it up here. All right, Dwayne, should I start Gus Edwards over James Conner this week?
Man, I probably would. And here's why. One, look, the matchup's tough both ways, right? The matchup's pretty tough for Conner. It's even more tough for Edwards. But we know that the team will stick with it with the Ravens. The problem for Conner isn't that anyone else is taking away his attempts. He's been hovering around the 50% of attempts mark since the season started, but this team throws the ball all the time now, Drake. If you look at the Steelers, over the last couple of weeks, they have led 70% and 60% of the snaps, and they're still throwing the ball 65% of the time. So if you think about the preseason, one of the narratives that we were all trying to figure out is will the Steelers just go back to throwing the ball all the time with Roethlisberger? And we kind of thought, with injury, let's, probably not, right? Well, here they are. They're doing it. They weren't doing it earlier this season, but now they are. And I think when I look at their team, it's not like they're forcing it. That's just where their playmakers are. If you have Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, we'll see how he does. I know he's got a toe injury. He was limited today. And you have Chase Claypool and you have Eric Ebron, who's running a route on 90% of dropbacks. It's what defense can really deal with all those weapons? So I get why they're doing it, but it's hurting James Conner. The 50% thing isn't really the issue. It's the fact that if you're going to drop back to pass 65 to 70% of the time, well, then 50% of the attempts is not worth it. And the other problem is Conner's just not getting targets because of all the other guys we just named that are really better targets than he is. So yeah, I don't blame you. If you want to start Gus Edwards over Conner, I think it's pretty much a coin flip. So that tells you enough, right? It shouldn't be a coin flip, but it is.
We got a lot of Gus Edwards questions here. Corey Richmond asks, Gus Edwards or Michael Pittman at flex this week?
Man, that one's tough. I'm gonna I would go with Edwards. I do think he's going to be guaranteed more work. Here's what I'll say. I think it still does depend. Like if you're looking for the bigger upside where you need, somebody that with 2 plays, right, could score, enough points to be worth starting. I do think that's still, Pittman, he scored a touchdown last week. He played really well. They're moving him all around. They're getting him in the slot. But Indy's a really balanced offense. We talked about this last week. Well, I think Pittman could take over as the lead guy. I don't see him ever being a 30 to 40% target player because that's just really not how this offense works. They like to spread it around. It's like you got a bunch of guys in that 15 to 20% target range. So I would be fine going with Gus Edwards at the flex this week.
The beer that our audience voted for me to crack this week is 3 Floyd's Zombie Dust. I'm not really feeling it too much this week, but you guys voted for it, so I will sip it down. And I have to sip it down because the next guy I'm going to talk about, goddamn Frank Gore. He's back, Dwayne. My arch nemesis, Frank Gore, is back. We've got LaMichael Pirine, high ankle sprain. You can cut him. He's done for the rest of the regular season. Look, Frank Gore comes in, 15 carries, 61 yards, catches a couple balls. The team sucks. We know this. They got back-to-back home games with the Dolphins and the Raiders. He's going to see volume. How many beers do I need to drink, Dwayne, to put Frank Gore in a lineup this week or next week? Trying to make the playoffs.
A lot. Because really his role, look at it, his role really didn't change that much. Over the last several weeks, he's been right at that 60 to 65% of rushing attempts. He was at 65% this week. So the offense is playing a little better. They are spreading the field out a little bit. This past week, they ran, I have it written down because I was just looking at it for the utilization report, which I got to finish up tonight. 92% of their 92% of their plays came out of 11 personnel this last week. 87% of their snaps were trailing. It's just funny. Like every week with Jets. Goodness, poor Jets fans. He honestly hasn't changed that much. The biggest change that he got with Pirine leaving is he saw his routes jump from that 20 to 25% range up to almost 50%, but his targets didn't go up. He saw 2. So I think you're going to see a player that's going to be in the 15 to 18 touch range, 14 to 18 touch range. In a deep league, I think Frank Gore's a guy that, you can pick up, and if you really have to plug somebody in, you can. You're just not going to get a lot of looks inside the 5. Last week, he had 2 attempts inside the 5. He had 100% of the team. Before that, you want to know how many attempts this team has even had inside the 5 as a team?
-3.
0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Ooh.
0. That was their first 2 of the season.
Wow.
Let that sink in, folks. First 2 rushing attempts of the season from inside the 5 for the Jets.
And again, we're trying to win championships here. And, you want guys with a little bit of juice. Frank Gore's got no juice. Nothing. What are we doing here? And let me admit this to you guys. What a terrible mistake I made this week. So as you all know, I work in liquor sales. That's my career during the week. So I had to work on Sunday with the holiday week. I'm driving down the highway, and I'm listening to, I think, Sirius XM, and I'm just trying to get like the inactives and this and that. And, the news comes across about PJ Walker getting the start in Carolina. And I go, damn, that's going to really curtail DJ Moore. Not thinking like how, PJ Walker was just airing it out all over the place in the XFL. So I go, you know what? I'm going to bench DJ Moore. And you know what? Oh, I've got this spry young running back on my bench who I could put in, and he's going to start this week, and I bet he gets me 10 points. That guy's name, Adrian Peterson. Why would I start Adrian Peterson over DJ Moore, or even on my bench, I had Antonio Brown? Like, I'm an idiot. That was the dumbest thing ever. Don't drive and set lineups. Just off. I had to get that
For
off.
the record, he didn't phone a friend, folks.
Whew.
I would have. Yeah. But hey, I'll tell you, Drake. I benched DJ Moore for the same reason, not for Adrian Peterson, but I talked myself into throwing him on the bench. In a few leagues, and in one of them, it was an FFPC league. It cost me. Had I left DJ Moore in my lineup, I would be in the playoffs in 13 leagues instead of 12, but I benched him for Jamison Crowder. So a Jet. Anyway, so
yeah,
I feel you.
Question here, and I know you had quite the weekend talking about Duke Johnson with some folks on Twitter. Guy here, Brandon, says, I'd rather start Frank Gore over Duke Johnson. So I know you kind of had a thing back and forth with a couple of guys about, Duke Johnson or Damian Harris. It turned out, Damian Harris did score a touchdown, but after the first quarter, he was never used again.
Yeah. Look, it was a better result with the wrong process, right? If you historically look back at this, which I look at these things, if you take a back that has the profile of Damian Harris, just take names off of it. You have this profile here, and you have this other profile of someone that's even being inefficient. Typically, the inefficient player that's getting more volume versus the efficient player who has a shaky game script history, 70% of the time, the volume guy wins. It's not, and that's what was funny. I really wasn't trying to debate, and it was kind of being brought at me like, oh, you just think that you know more than everybody else and that my analysis doesn't matter. That really wasn't my point at all. My point was the data doesn't lie. I've looked at years and years and years of this. There is a percentages play, and it's really clear. Now, that doesn't mean you can't start Damian Harris because, that's what you want to do. We're here to have fun, right? Ultimately, fantasy football should be fun. So you don't have to be a robot. You don't have to be a computer. So if you want to start Damian Harris, great, but don't say it's because really that's what, all the data and everything says that you should do, because it's not. That would be a lie. So Duke Johnson, though, still 77% of the snaps, 15%, 14% of the targets, 70% routes, 71% of the rushing attempts. And he's still in a better offense than the Jets, right? So I would still start Duke Johnson personally over Frank Gore. Here's the way to think about Duke Johnson, folks. It's basically David Montgomery version 2 for this season. We all get it. We don't really want to be playing them if we don't have to, but if I have to choose between Duke Johnson and a player that could be in a game script that immediately means they only get 30% of the snaps, I'm just going to start Duke Johnson, right? I'm not going to start Duke Johnson over, a stud, that gets, maybe just a little bit less work than him. I'm just going to start him over guys that get a third of his work. You should do that every time. And if you do that every time over the long term, you win in fantasy football. If you go back and forth, oh, this time I will, this time I won't. It's just think about coaches that go for it on fourth down or they don't. Really, the only way analytics work is you can't just do it sometimes. You got to do it all the time for the percentages to play out, right? So it's the same kind of thing in fantasy football. So hopefully that makes sense to people.
Here's a guy, and I texted Dwayne last night, and he called me the king of garbage touchdowns or something to that effect, because I have
rando touchdowns. You get the most random freaking touchdowns.
If there's a scrub on the waiver wire, I will find him, and I will play him, and he will score a touchdown, except for Adrian Peterson. And this week in the Kings Classic League, I started Cam Akers. And I put up the wrong question here. Sorry. And we have a question from Justin Smith saying, can we talk about Cam Akers and Fab in a deep league? Now, he didn't do a whole lot, but God bless him. He got in the end zone, and I beat Chris Prince of Roto Grinders, and now I'm in third or fourth place, and I'm probably going to make the playoffs. So, as our boy Adam Levitan likes to say, shout out to me. So I'll pump that up here. Let's talk about Cam Akers here. If he's out there in a bunch of leagues, any interest?
Yeah, he's worth a stash. You're never going to want to start him unless you have to, where you got a lot of bye weeks like what you had last week, and a full strength schedule this weekend where you got everybody playing. I'm hard pressed to think there's really any format where Cam Akers is going to be in anybody's lineup. He's really just still a stash play. He only played 17% of the snaps last week. The week before, 26%. The week before that, 21%. Attempts, 31%, 37%, 24%. And here's the problem. Most of the first down snaps and rushing are going to Darrell Henderson. He gets over half of that. Almost all of the long down and distance and 2-minute work is going to Malcolm Brown. And then over the last 2 weeks, Malcolm Brown has snuck in, and he's taking over half of the short down and distance work, right? So that's beyond just inside the 5. That means you've got second, third, or fourth down and 2 yards or less to go. Malcolm Brown's taking almost all of that. Cam Akers he gets 0. He gets nothing out of 2 minute. He gets nothing out of long down and distance. He gets nothing. You got 1 carry, to your point, and he had 1 snap inside the 5 this week, 1 snap inside the 5 the week before. And it's kind of random, right? It's basically, is he in the drive or does he happen to get in there, at the right time so that he's the guy on the field whenever they're inside the 5-yard line? So my problem with Akers is just that, Drake. Like, he's basically the extra kind of just floating piece, like really what Jordan Wilkins went back to this week in Indy.
Mm-hmm.
So one injury is probably, is that going to be enough? Yeah, he probably goes into Darrell Henderson's old role if Darrell Henderson gets hurt. If Malcolm Brown gets hurt, I don't know that Akers has any role because I don't know if the coaches trust him. They're at least they get Darrell Henderson out there in some of those other opportunities, whereas Cam Akers sees 0, right? So that's my problem. It's got to, and look, this guy that we liked, heading into the season, and for a good reason. So I'm not saying that he can't still do something, but I'm not going to drop. There's a lot of things I'm not going to be willing to drop, right, to add Cam Akers at this point. There's just so many things he's got to overcome to be, relevant.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple of guys who made news today because they're going to be coming back from injured reserve. And this is a boon to fantasy owners who've been holding on to these guys for a number of weeks. So let's get into them here. I doubt they're on your waiver wire, but you never know, they could be, or you might be able to swing a trade. We'll talk about him here because we have a question from Kenny Hyde. He says, does Kalen Ballage still have a role when Austin Ekeler returns? And the news on Ekeler is that they've activated him and his 21-day window is now counting down. So we should see him maybe this week, maybe next week, but Ekeler will be back. Do you think we see any role for Ballage when Eckler's back, kind of in that old school Melvin Gordon role?
I think he'll see a little bit, but I think the Chargers have shown, Ballage hasn't looked good, right? I mean, he's not been good. He's just getting the volume. That says a lot about Josh Kelly. Poor Josh Kelly. Rest in peace. And now Justin Jackson was out again this last week. But, Troy Pope just kind of went to the wayside. What this shows me is that the Chargers are at a point where they're willing to basically go with one back. Because if you're willing, they don't have to do this with Ballage. Josh Kelly's still there. Troy Pope is still there. What this shows me, man, is that there is hope that when Austin Ekeler comes back, if he takes the role that Kalen Ballage is currently in, which is like 70% of the snaps, over 60% of the rushing attempts, running a route on over 50% of the dropbacks, dude, he's going to be a top 6 RB like the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And I would start him immediately. As soon as I hear he's back, he's in my lineup. And the thing is, look, the guy's been recovering a long time. I don't think we have to worry about his first week back, right? Because it's not like, oh, it's Julio Jones. He rested a week after he re-hurt it, and now he's been limited all week, and he's going to come back, right? When Ekeler comes back, I'll be fairly certain that he's 100% because he's missed a large amount of time, and they've been careful with him. I don't think they're going to rush it. So there's a good chance I think we see him this week, Drake. I think if he's out there, he's going to be 100%. And that first week, right, they may not give it all to him. But, man, it very easily could be the week after where if he's getting the work Ballage is, like, you could see him be the RB1 in all of fantasy like the rest of the way. Like, if that happens, look how good this offense is playing. Justin Herbert, is throwing 3 to 4 touchdown passes every single game. I mean, Austin Ekeler is going to have plenty of opportunity to get in the end zone.
I'm just looking at my Kings Classic team that I referenced earlier because there's a certain running back I got sitting on my injured reserve, and his name's Austin Ekeler. So I won't have to start guys like, Cam Akers and Jakeem Grant. My 3 flexes. This is a 14 team. Nobody cares about my leagues, but hey, we're talking fantasy. 14 team league. 3 receivers start and 3 flexes. My 3 flexes were Devontae Booker, Jakeem Grant, and Cam Akers, and I won. So, again, God bless America. Some other guys coming off IR. Chris Carson Finally, looks like he's going to be back this week, and there's word that Rashaad Penny could return the following week. So this looks to me like it could be kind of a mess for fantasy because remember last year, guys, Penny was getting some good run at the end of the season, and he's a really nice pass catcher, and they still have Carlos Hyde, and he's looking good. So would it shock you, Dwayne, if Pete Carroll said, you know what, let's just pound the rock with all three of these guys and just, we're not going to have, Russ Cook anymore. And then everyone's just like, well, which guy do I start? Why none of them are coming through? And the answer is, yeah, they're not.
Yeah. I mean, I think anything's possible. I think with the weapons they have in the passing game, assuming that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett remain healthy, I would be hard pressed to think they don't just let Russ cook. They need to do something a little bit different though, because Wilson's pressing, and he feels a need, right, to be able to make up for the defense and all the other things that are going wrong, with the Seahawks. But their schedule is about to get quite a bit better as far as, the level of offensive opponents that they're going to be facing. So I expect that we could see a little more. Just look, when we get into the colder months of the year, you automatically passing goes down a little bit, right? I mean, look in Cleveland, like 3 games in a row where you just didn't want to have any part of playing, in a Browns offense, right? Because of the weather. So that's an extreme example, but that kind of stuff does hit. So you do see a little bit less running, a little bit less passing, as we get into the deeper months of the season. But as far as overall, I wouldn't make a big prediction, right? That Russ isn't going to continue to throw the ball a lot. And I think to your point, it wouldn't surprise me though, if all 3 guys are involved, because we've seen Pete Carroll do that in the past. 2 seasons ago it happened, right? It was Chris Carson, Mike Davis, and Rashaad Penny, right? All 3 of those guys got work. They all kind of had their niche, if you will. You could easily see that happen, again this year, especially if they think they want to just keep all 3 guys fresh and they don't want anybody to be hurt. I did see Shirley asked in the chat, when is it time to stash Rashaad Penny? It would be this week. In deeper leagues, I already did it, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I would not drop Jamal Williams though. That was her question. Would you drop Jamal Williams if you're not the Aaron Jones manager? Right. And the reason why I say that is I just think Jamal Williams, if Aaron Jones gets hurt, has more value right now than Rashaad Penny would if Chris Carson came back this week and got hurt again, because you still have Carlos Hyde to deal with. You got AJ Dillon in Green Bay, but Dillon just hasn't been much of a factor at all. Whereas Hyde's a guy that they've been very willing, to have involved in the offense in Seattle.
Yeah, if you remember last year with Rashaad Penny, he was again injured numerous games and missed a ton of them. But before he got hurt again in week 14, he had a game week 8 where he had almost 50% of the snaps and rushed for 129 yards. The next week he ran for 74 yards and a score with 47% of the snaps. And, then he went down, but he's a good player. So if you could stash him, hey, there's,
he could, I will say stylistically, like he could be the best fit for this version of the offense, right? Because he's probably of the 3, he's the best receiving back, right? I think his pass blocking has been questionable at times, but from what I understand, it's gotten a little bit better. So, but even then, right, even if he took over the lead role, I still see the other 2 guys being involved, right? I mean, even think about like Chris Carson, like people kind of are in love with Chris Carson, but what they don't remember is that the guy was only getting like 12, 13, 14 carries, Drake. It's not like this was a guy getting 20 carries a game before he got hurt. This is a 10 to 14 attempt guy, and he was making up for it by catching 3 or 4 balls, and he was scoring touchdowns. So the Seahawks just need to get their offense going again, period, or people aren't going to be or folks won't be as happy with Chris Carson this second time around either.
Raheem Mostert's also scheduled to come back sooner than later. That 49ers team is just kind of broken right now. They don't have a quarterback. There's a million injuries on defense. But, hey, if Raheem Mostert's there and they're going to give him 15 carries, he's super explosive and can definitely do more, in my opinion, than JaMychal Hasty or Jerick McKinnon or whatever, guy that Shanahan's pulling off the street. So, if he's out there or you can get him via trade super cheap, that'd be fantastic in my mind. Let's go wide receiver. Dwayne, we talked a lot about Michael Pittman last week, so we don't have to go crazy on it. He's only owned in 43% of Yahoo leagues, only had 3 targets, but caught all 3 of them this week for 66 and a touchdown. He gets Tennessee, Houston, and Vegas the next 3 weeks. Jalen Reagor, same thing. We talked about him a ton. This Eagles team, we'll get into that in a minute in our downgrade section, but he gets Seattle this week, who's been notorious this year for getting torched by wide receivers. Anything quickly on those 2 guys, as the top wide receiver pickups?
No, man, I think you hit on it. They're moving Pittman all over the place. He's made a big play 2 weeks in a row. I could see him leading the team in targets the rest of the way, being their top option. But again, I just don't see the top option on that team being 30 to 40% of the targets, right? I see it being topping out around 23 to 24%, which can still be good. It's just that it's a balanced offense, right? And so you're just going to have to deal with some weeks where he only sees 3 targets, like what you were just talking about. Then you have other weeks where he's going to see 7 or 8. The good news is, he's been very efficient with those opportunities, and he's making more big plays, really, than what I thought he was capable of. But getting to work out of the slot's really creating some great matchups for Pittman.
Another guy you're going to want to keep your eye on, and it could be sneaky. You could get him for almost nothing, I bet. You might be able to get him for free tomorrow after waivers clear, is Russell Gage. Now, Julio Jones, we don't know with his hamstring. They say he could be up to a game-time decision. Russell Gage, we've seen be very productive in games where one of the other receivers is out. He had 12 targets last week. Julio was in and out of the lineup. This is a team we know they're probably going to be trailing. They love to throw the ball. They can't run it to save their lives. Spot start, would you throw Russell Gage in?
Yeah, if I had to, in the other weeks where Julio has been, had issues, it's not like Russell Gage is blown up. So it's not anything I'm going to force. I could just as easily see him have 3 targets as I could see him have 10, right? Their receiving core is really confusing, right? Because this weekend, whenever, Julio left, it wasn't Olamide taking over, but that's the same thing we saw when Calvin Ridley went down. It wasn't Olamide taking over within that game. And I'm blanking Drake.
It's like they have certain guys who back up other guys.
But no, but they don't. That's my point. We think they do, but they don't. We thought originally that I'm pulling it up right now. We thought originally that Christian Blake was the backup for Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
And so not everybody, but if you were in a super deep league, you carried Christian Blake that first week, and he did nothing. The week where, Ridley left the game, he had 55% of the routes. And the 2 weeks after, he had the next week he had 13%. Last week, whenever Julio went down, it was Christian Blake that came in. But what we've seen in the weeks following, it's been Olamide Zaccheaus has been the guy that's come in the following week for each guy. So he's done it once for Ridley, and he's done it once for Julio already this season. So if I had to pick up a Atlanta receiver outside of Gage, it would be Olamide Zaccheaus. I don't have a lot of confidence in any of them, Drake. Any one of them could put up 8 to 9 targets. Any one of them could put up 2 outside of Calvin Ridley. Hayden Hurst is the other name, right? People he doesn't get enough respect. He's got 8 targets over 20 yards. He has 3 other names in that category with him: Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, and Mark Andrews, averaging over 80% of the routes, seeing, between 15 and 20% of the targets every week. He's in the top 12 tight ends. He's one big week away from being in the top 4 or 5 tight ends, so that's the guy that I would look to the most.
How about Nelson Agholor? This week, 9 targets, 6 catches for 88 and a touchdown. Gets Atlanta and the Jets the next 2 weeks. He's got 6 touchdowns on the season. Dwayne, you put out an interesting tweet about Henry Ruggs, who is basically Casper the Friendly Ghost at this point. It's kind of like the Waller show, and they mix in some shots to Agholor. So what were you finding about this Raiders offense?
Yeah, the biggest thing is what you mentioned. Ruggs is just it's just a downward trend. He had worked his way up to 90% of the routes, and since then, it's 81, 87%, and then last week down to 65%. You've got that big moment in the game where you hear Derek Carr, because there's no crowd, yell out, "Henry, I need you," and he's telling him basically, "Can you beat press coverage here?" And Ruggs couldn't, and he had to go to Agholor. And so I was watching Ruggs really closely during the game. I haven't been able to go back and watch it in the all 22, but I was able to watch it, with the live footage. And he was struggling to beat press coverage all night. I saw Derek Carr looking at him as the first read multiple times, and he just had to go away. So Ruggs is probably, he's probably a year away is what I'm going to say. So I don't think he's a must own anymore. If you guys feel like there's something else that you've got to do, if I'm in a deep league, I still try to hang on to Henry Ruggs. But if I'm not, if I'm in more of, your typical league size, Henry Ruggs isn't, a must own. He's a player that you could just move on from. Agholor still scares me, Trey, because it's so sporadic, right? It's like 9 targets, 2 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets, 9 targets. Like, it's just like, it's a roller coaster. You don't want to start a 2 to 3 to 4 target player, right? And what it really ties back to is what I talked about, before. The Raiders, if you look, when they can, they just want to run the ball. So on those games, so like if I look at Agholor, week 7, he had 9 targets. Well, guess what? They had to pass the ball 67% of the time. This past week, he had 9 targets. Well, guess what? They had to pass the ball almost 60% of the time. Those are the 2 highest pass percentage marks in the last 6 weeks. And those are the 2 big weeks for Agholor. So basically, you got to line up, when is that game happening, right? And really, it's hard to do that, man. The only way is when they're playing a loaded offense. If they've got to play the Seahawks, if they've got to play the Chiefs. In fact, those 2 games are probably – no, that one game – the other game was Buffalo, where they did that, I believe. I was going to say one of them might have been the other. They might have both been Kansas City, but I want to say the other one was Buffalo. So you got to be in a game where the Raiders are going to have to pass, and it's hard to pick those games unless they're playing another offensive juggernaut.
Got a wide receiver question here for the week. Rank these wide receivers this week, Dwayne. Juju, Justin Jefferson, and Devontae Parker.
Yeah, for this week, especially if Thielen's out, like Justin Jefferson is in my top. You're going to have to see what's up with Juju, right, with the toe. Right. Assuming Juju's healthy, I would go Jefferson, Juju, Parker. But I have no problems with Parker. He's seeing 25, 30% of the targets every single week. It's just a slow offense, right? They don't run a lot of plays. They would like to run the ball as much as they can. They like to play defense. They're still nursing along Tua. So that puts Parker at the tail end of it, for me. But he and Juju are pretty close.
You want rando guys. Here we go. From Johnny Guerrero, thoughts on Jacoby Myers and Damiere Byrd going forward? We saw Byrd exploded this week with a big game. But again, this is just a slow offense, and it's just a bad offense, to be honest. I don't really know what to say.
Honestly, the Damiere Byrd thing, look, he's been getting all the routes all along. There just wasn't any utilization, right? So I tend to think that this is probably just a flash in the pan for Damiere Byrd. If you want to pick him up and just hold him because you're in a super deep format, great. But I wouldn't start him. I'd be hard pressed to name somebody you could release him for. N'Keal Harry's the other guy just to keep your eye on. He's getting to work from the slot more, which really helps him because he cannot beat press coverage. So he's working from the slot about 35 to 40%. He saw around, I want to say he saw it. I have it in front of me right now, Drake, but like 20%. Of the targets, maybe a little more, maybe it's like 22, 24% of the targets. He didn't look good earlier in the season, but he's still a young player. So a guy in deeper leagues you can keep an eye on. Jacoby Myers is fine. He was out there all the snaps. Remember, 3 to 4 weeks is what the opposing defense watches on film. So guess who is squarely in everybody's crosshairs now? Jacoby Myers.
There you go.
This is the way this stuff works, especially if you don't have someone else to take the heat off. Now, he gets quite a bit of protection in the slot. They move him around a lot, so I wouldn't freak out about it. But I feel the pain of folks because I also benched DJ Moore for Jacoby Myers in like 2 or 3 leagues last week, and it sucked. So
thought I wasn't the only one.
Yeah. It made sense to do at the time. So I'm still okay with Jacoby Myers. I don't see them just going away from him. 3 weeks before that, 40% of the targets. We've seen them heavily target, Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, Danny Amendola, you name it, out of that slot Z role, even though it's not Tom Brady. We know that offense is willing to channel through that, and that's the role Jacoby Myers is still getting to play. And, he's still been effective. So I think he'll bounce back. I think he's fine. We're also getting defensive questions.
We'll get there. We'll get them. Okay. Don't worry.
Right. We'll go to defense later.
I like all the folks here that ask questions. A lot of these things are like, I've got the show rundown on the other computer screen here. A lot of these we're going to get to. We're going to talk some defenses this week. We'll definitely get to them. But we just got to go in order here. And I just want to let you guys know it's like 11 o'clock right now in the East Coast, so the kids are probably in bed. So you can let them know, if they're talking Christmas presents. There's a rumor going around, Dwayne, that there might be some fantasy football hustle merchandise available for the holidays.
Yeah, I know. It's like, did your elf on a shelf tell you that?
He did. Actually, he comes, if my son is going to watch the show, his name is Dave. Our elf doesn't have a very original name. His name's Dave, and he will be out, Thursday or Friday, whenever we come back from my in-laws. So,
we have an elf. His name's Sparky. He's not here yet. He'll be here in a few days, but he's got a burn mark on his ass because he was playing up in, one of our chandeliers, and he was setting on a light bulb. And he caught on fire one year, but he's kept those same pants. It's kind of interesting. You'd think, as handy as elves are, like they would have patched that up and got him a new pair. But
he's like that player. Like he gets out, he doesn't even dust off. He's like, the hell with this. I'm going back in, coach. So yeah, check that out. We'll be having some news on a little merch coming our way, pretty soon. So that's always fun. What else did I want to talk about here before we get to tight ends? Hey, let's hit this Joe Burrow injury, man. Joe Burrow, bad knee injury. Like, I love how they replay it 1,000 times. And, every injury doctor on Twitter has to creep into mentions and put their spin on it, which if go on Twitter, you'll find out the info on that. But so are we downgrading all these Bengals here? What do we do with our boy T. Higgins? What do we do with Tyler Boyd? I mean, can we even play him anymore with these scrub quarterbacks?
You prefer not to, man. Finley is bad. Allen is bad. It's funny, man. It's like Higgins hit 92%. I don't have it right in front of me. 92% of the routes last week. It was a season high. He finally got to 10 targets. I had actually talked about it on Twitter beforehand that this is probably the week where he gets to 10 targets just because the nature of these two offenses and how fast a pace they run. But I didn't know that 4 of them would come from Ryan Finley, of which 0 would be catchable because Ryan Finley sucks. So, yeah, man, you want to avoid it. I own as much T. Higgins as anyone, and he is on the bench everywhere. I've had someone I could replace him with everywhere. I'm trying to think of the worst option that I replaced him with, Drake.
Is it Adrian Peterson? There's nothing worse than that. Frank Gore?
No, it was no. No, and no. I'm like you. I still need more upside than that. But you could get me someone similar in their utilization range that if they had, some more upside, I'd probably consider them at this point over T. Higgins. So there's no way I can have T. Higgins in until I see, something from one of these quarterbacks.
How about
Boyd is the one. Boyd is the one guy. Boyd's the one guy that did survive last year. And it wasn't great, right? The offense overall is not going to score touchdowns now. So that's going to be a problem. But Boyd could see plenty of targets underneath 4 PPR formats. He could still see, 6, he'll probably see 6 to 10 targets, maybe 11 or 12 a game, of which maybe he'll catch 5 or 6 that'll be on target, 60, 70 yards. So he could be in that 12 to 18 point range every week in PPR. You probably still roll with Boyd. Everybody else I would get out. Gio, man, the Bengals are amazing. Like you can't make this stuff up, Drake. So Gio Bernard, passing down specialist, right? That's what Gio Bernard is. No, he's not. He doesn't play on long down and distance now. He
took the Joe Mixon role.
Yeah, he's not playing in the 2-minute offense now. That's all going to Samaje Perine. You got to get Samaje Perine involved, right? So basically, Gio Bernard is also now unstartable. Because most of his value came through the passing game, and now they're not going to use him there because they just want to bang his little body between the tackles. I think they have the roles reversed, like Perine should probably be the guy banging, and then that sounded terrible.
Oh.
it should be Gio Bernard as the guy maybe getting 30-40% of the carries and then handling, most of the passing duties like he was before. But this is the Bengals. It's opposite world, opposite land. Mm-hmm. In 2020, the Bengals are a flat-out dumpster fire.
I'll mention the tight ends here. We won't go too in-depth on them. We're already an hour into the show. But check your waiver wire. A lot of these guys are available. Jordan Reed, 16% owned in Yahoo. He's coming off a bye. He had 5 for 62 in week 10. He gets the Rams, Bills, Washington football team, and then the Cowboys coming up. Jordan Akins, Randall Cobb's hurt. We got to see how that plays out. He caught 5 for 83 this past week. Though tough matchup with Detroit, you wouldn't think it, but they've allowed the second fewest tight end yards this season. Dwayne's boy, Dalton Schultz, he's only owning 20% of the leagues, and he's got a rapport with Dalton. He caught 4 for 25 and a touchdown. And then, we're going to play tight end roulette in Seattle with Jacob Hollister and Will Dissly now that Greg Olsen is hurt. Any thoughts on those guys, people who are dying at tight end, which is anyone who doesn't own, Kelsey and Waller?
No, man, I don't have anything like sticks out about any of them. I mean, Dissly saw a big jump in snaps, but not in routes. Mm-hmm. So he was the primary guy that was on the field. But we've seen Dissly catch passes in the past, right? Hollister didn't really see much of a bump after Olsen went out. He saw a slight bump. But they rotate those tight ends so much, with the Seahawks. And it really stinks for Greg Olsen because, he was kind of starting to see a little bit more work again. But that foot is just – it's problematic, for him. It's probably time to just, who am I to tell somebody when it's their time to hang him up and do that? But I know he's going to be a really good announcer one day, so I'll be happy to see him in the booth. But if he keeps playing, great, good for him. The name, though, that I would touch on just real quickly, I know we're done with receivers, but Kuti could be valuable, in shootouts in really deep leagues. I would say more of a DFS play. So, for example, this week, I would guess the chalk is mostly going to be that Houston-Detroit game. I would guess there's going to be Deshaun Watson will have a ton of ownership. So if you're going to run that stack, I would get Kiki Kuti in it. I would probably run one team with Fuller and Kuti, and then one team with Cooks and Kuti, and then maybe even have Akins in there in one of those. And then, obviously you're going to bring it back with one of the Lions players. But I think those are the ways that whenever you're playing in, a 3-game field, really you have to do it, period. Like you're trying to win a Millie Maker or whatever. But especially when you're in these formats, you can't go start Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks and Deshaun Watson and expect to win, right? You have to trade off game theory for expected points. You could, I shouldn't say you can't, you would have to find another area to differentiate, right? So you would want to avoid Gus Edwards. I know we're getting into DFS here, but
for example, people ask for it all the time. Let's do it.
So if you do that, then what you would need to do is you would need to be off of Gus Edwards and you would need to play Justice Hill. You have to do things like that to win in those tournaments, even though you're going to feel wrong about it and be like, well, I'm not optimizing my points. No, you're not. You're trying to win a tournament, which means you need to play it that way every time. Again, it's a percentages game so that when luck does play into your favor, you get a huge payday. You're not trying to win $20. You're trying to win first, second, or third place, which is where all the money is, right? There's nothing in winning 20th and 30th place in these things. They're all weighted to the top just so they can get enough people to enter. So just keep that in mind.
If Dez Bryant is on the Millie Maker team for whatever the big payout is this week, I'm giving away 5 free shirts next week on the podcast. You had a tweet about Dez Bryant, and we're going to get into some offenses that we want to kind of maybe avoid going towards the playoffs, players we want to get rid of. And the Ravens came up for me, and you had an interesting tweet about Dez and the targets he's seeing versus, let's say, a Devin Duvernay, young kid out of Texas, who should be playing more. And, rational coaching says, F that.
Yeah, the thing with the Ravens is they ran more 11 personnel this past week really than they have all season. And if you think about it, they lost their other tight end Boyle the week before. You also saw Mark Andrews have a huge spike, and Mark Andrews is going to be back to what we were used to, for the rest of this season. maybe even more because he's going to see a ton of volume. But, Des Bryant, got out there a lot in the 11 personnel, and he was really taking place of Devin Duvernay, like you said, who had really been on an upward trend as far as his snaps, his routes. Everything had been up for like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. That all just came to an end. Des played 58% of the snaps, saw 18% of the targets. That wasn't all just coming from inside the 5 or inside the 10. They were using him all over the field. So, I mean, it's a pretty sizable role, for Bryant. Not somebody I would be trusting, in season-long lineups, really more just still a DFS play as it sits today. But Hollywood Brown, man, dude, like
droppable.
Lamar, well, here's the problem. Like, it's not Hollywood, it's Lamar. Lamar Jackson cannot hit him. He has an ADOT in week 10 of 19.5. Last week, he has an ADOT of 21, so, I mean, his air yards and everything are there. They're just not hitting the plays. So it's tough because, like, if Lamar Jackson were to find his groove and you drop Marquise Brown, you're going to, he's the kind of guy that you will kick yourself on, right? Some of these other guys we talk about, it's like, whatever, no big deal. Just
nobody cares if you don't have Nelson Agholor.
Yeah, but cutting Marquise Brown, those are the kind that I fear, right? Because as soon as you do, it's going to happen, right? So you got to be careful with it. But yeah, Dez is playing. Really shouldn't be owned in season long unless we're talking about super deep formats.
All right, let me talk about the Eagles. So this offense is obviously very broken, and it comes back to play calling, which is not very original. The route concepts are very predictable. Carson Wentz is he is not throwing with any anticipation. He's kind of a see it, throw it quarterback at this point, which is not how you win in the NFL. He just looks horrible. All right. The schedule's brutal. They've got a ton of good teams coming up, and they just elevated Jordan Howard to the active roster, which in my mind, Dwayne, means they're going to look to pound the rock. They want to take the pressure off of Wentz and just say, you know what, let's just bang Sanders and Howard down people's throats, where if you watch their game against the Browns this week, that's what their first drive was. Their line dominated the Browns. They marched down the field, and then Sanders fumbled the ball into the end zone. And, that's the Eagles season in a nutshell. But I think that's kind of what they're going to do. I have a whole other theory on why Wentz is playing bad. He goes back to Jalen Hurts and all this other stuff. But I want to just get your opinion. Travis Fulgham, to me, is dead. You could drop him in my mind. I don't think you would ever have trust playing him in a lineup. Goddard is looking really good, playing nearly all the snaps. He went 9 for 110 and a touchdown the last 2 weeks with over a 15% target share. Ertz is going to come back, so you got to watch for that. Maybe if you're dead on a waiver wire, you can pick up Zach Ertz. But just my kind of general thoughts on the Eagles offense. Not excited to play really any of these guys at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's understandable. I wouldn't say Fulgham. Fulgham had 7 targets this last week. Just 2 weeks ago on 7 targets, I think he was in the top 24 wide receivers. So there's just variance, man. It's fantasy football. It's football. The ball bounces one way one week. It bounces another the next week. Some weeks you play in a hurricane. Some weeks you play, in the sun, down in Tampa. There's a lot of variables. There are a lot of variables. What I do agree with is you're going to see a more spread out offense as they continue to get more healthy, right? Rager's back, Fulgham's in there, Goddard's in there. You're going to get Ertz back. Miles Sanders is demanding, 5 targets per game. Technically that should help everyone, but Fulgham, to your point, he was really a volume play before. But I'm not dropping him. I own him in several leagues, and I'm keeping him just because, his route's still at 95%. It's not like Alshon Jeffrey's taking that from him. Alshon Jeffrey really –
he's terrible.
Yeah, Alshon Jeffrey isn't doing a lot. So I'm fine with keeping Fulgham. I agree that maybe you don't trust him as much right now in your lineup, but his opportunities are really, they're still there. He's not getting the 10 and 12 targets like he was, but 7 targets a week, is not bad. You just need them to be better targets. And that's the problem right now. It's Carson Wentz is really a pain in everybody's ass.
Yeah. Fulgham, some of these, I watch all these games. A lot of his targets too are late in the game, total garbage time, and their throws that he can't even catch. They're just, whatever. But interesting to see if they start really pounding the rock there. To me,
maybe they'll do that. Maybe they'll do that. I don't know. I think they just want a guy they can use inside the 5. That's what my gut says. But I mean, maybe they will pound the rock more. I'll tell you this: Miles Sanders is like his utilization is really strong. He just needs the offense to be a little bit better. He's doing all the things you would want. I mean, he's a 20 touch back. Down the stretch. I could see Howard stealing some carries from him inside the 5. But Sanders, man, he's seeing plenty of work. He's a buy low if your trade window is still open, in your league, because utilization is there. We know we've seen him make big plays in the past. And so really eventually those two things are going to converge, right? His talent plus the opportunities he's getting, he's going to eventually have a big week. So Sanders is a buy low if you can get it right now. And if you own him, yeah, he's a guy you just got to keep starting.
I think they want to get the ball out of Wentz's hands this week. And I'm going to say this is going to sound like the most homerish Eagle thing of all time, but it's football. What happens in DFS, Dwayne? Because I listen to 1,000 podcasts a week, and there's always that chalk play, and everyone goes like, oh my God, for instance, Eagles are playing the Seahawks this week, on that Monday night slate, start DK Metcalf, they're all going to go off, they'll win by 1 million. And then what happens? The complete opposite, because it's football. Everyone tells these guys how much they suck. And then all of a sudden, guess what happens? The Eagles win the game. I'm calling an Eagles victory right now. Eagles upset the Seahawks on Monday night at the Link, 23-21. Calling it right now. Let's keep rolling here.
Bold strategy, Cotton.
Yeah, hey, we're with it. How about your Cowboys? CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper here, looking at much, much better. Now we've got Andy Dalton back in the fold, so who knows if they're dropped or they're available via trade in your league, but Cooper's only not gone over 65 yards once since Dak went down. That was when Ben DiNucci was playing quarterback, and Dwayne or I could have done a better job than him. And Lamb looks, freaking elite out there. You saw what he did with that touchdown catch, and they're giving him some runs, and he's just an awesome player. So what are your thoughts on the boys here going the rest of the way?
Well, they moved Zach Martin to right tackle. And so you didn't, right tackle's been a problem all season. I mean, literally it's been a turnstile. So now you have a little bit more, time in the pocket, which Andy Dalton is the type of quarterback that, he obviously needs that. He likes to get the ball out quick, but you got to give him, enough time to not be in panic mode. So, I expect the Cowboys offense it's not going to be like what it was with Dak, but maybe it can be stabilized now. We'll see. Mm-hmm. This weekend they play Washington, who's got a really good pass rush. So I think they're going to be tested. We'll see, on Thursday how well that line holds up, against the front seven of the Washington football team. But yeah, I think, this last week they ran more 11 personnel than they have since Andy Dalton took over. And I think a big part of that is because they trusted the line more, weren't needing to keep tight ends in to do extra blocking, things like that. And, the thing with the Cowboys right now, Drake, like the biggest thing is they're not quitting anymore. The last 3 games, they've actually played, really hard. They took the Steelers down to the wire. So, while they don't have the talent they had at the beginning of the season, they're at least playing really hard and they're executing overall pretty well right now. Again, it's like 60% of what we were getting out of Dak. But yeah, I think, CeeDee Lamb, is a wide receiver 3 right now. Amari is a wide receiver 2. Michael Gallup, until further notice, just belongs on benches or on wires. Dalton Schultz is a borderline, tight end 1. He runs a route over 80% of the dropbacks almost every single week. He's seeing 4 to 5 targets. You don't have the upside, right, of them scoring the 40 and 45 points like you did before. But the targets, right, and the plays are still there. It's just the touchdowns that are missing.
Yeah, real sad situation today too in Dallas, where strength and conditioning coach Marcus Paul, who is a member of the Syracuse University All-Century team, he was a hell of a defensive back here at Syracuse. Suffered, I believe, a heart attack or a seizure or something like that, and is just not in a good way. There's reports that he passed, and other reports he's just kind of, very, very in grave situations. So, our Syracuse and Cowboys connections here. So, thoughts and prayers to his family. Marcus Paul, a kid that I watched a lot growing up, playing here at Syracuse and now coaching with the Cowboys. Let's turn to a couple of rookie running backs here before we get out of here. And I know we're still going to talk defense. Don't worry. How about Jonathan Taylor and CEH and their usage this week? Kind of really flipping the script. Everyone was just so down on these two. And Jonathan Taylor, 26 total touches. He had 22 rushes, 4 catches, 114 total yards, even had a touchdown called back. And this is in a game, Dwayne, where they trailed by 2 touchdowns at the half. So this game script wasn't necessarily in Jonathan Taylor's favor, and he got some work. And then I know you put out some great stuff on CEH, so we can get to him and his touches versus Bell and my boy Darrell Williams. So do we have any confidence in these two heading into our playoffs? We can put them in our stinking lineups.
Well, I mean, if you own Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're just putting him in your lineup. It just is what it is, right? You need the touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns last week. That carried you to an RB2 finish. If you don't get the touchdowns, that means you get 12 to 14 carries for 60 to 70 yards plus 2 catches and 20 yards. I mean, you're getting 10, 11 points. It's not the worst thing ever. But the days of thinking that CEH could give you 5 to 6 receptions for 50 yards, give you another 100 yards on the game, give you 2 touchdowns, those days are gone. They're over. Darrell Williams is getting all the long down and distance work, getting all the 2-minute work. Le'Veon Bell's carving out another 30% of his attempts. So, I mean, basically he's out there about half. Now, there's worse things than being on the field half the time in one of the best offenses in the league. So, basically, he's in Frank Gore's role, but on the polar opposite offense, right? That's the difference, right? He plays in an offense that's down inside the 5 all the damn time. They're going to score a lot of points, meaning – that even though he's on the field less, he has higher odds of being able to hit pay dirt and scoring big fantasy points. But you are going to be relying on touchdowns. So it's just the way it is. But it's fine. Look, running back is super weak this year, Drake. Yeah. Like, I get amazed. Like, when I went and looked up Jonathan Taylor today, for writing my article, and I was like looking at where he is right now, and he's RB16. Like, Jonathan Taylor hasn't done shit, and he's RB16. So saying that, those things are all really bad about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just take it all into context, right? When you look around at what everybody else is having to start in some of these cases, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's fine. He's a solid RB2. You wish that he still had the role he had, but he's fine. As far as Taylor goes, yeah, man. I mean, just last week we were saying basically you can't start him, which you couldn't. And, we heard some more noise that, he's still our starter, but we've heard that kind of stuff from the Colts coaching staff before, but they really did stick with it this week. So I don't trust this coaching staff. I don't know about you, but it's kind of the way I felt about Doug Peterson. I had to really be shown that Miles Sanders was going to be the guy before I could truly trust it. So I know we're in crunch time though, right? I mean, you don't have a lot of time to decide, do I trust this guy or not? If you own Jonathan Taylor and you need help in your second running back spot, put him in. I don't know what else to tell you. They played the Titans this weekend. He could easily score a touchdown in that matchup. They're soft all over. They gave up a ton in the passing game. They give up, a ton on the ground. It's, there could be plenty of points in this game. So the thing I would say about Taylor is you hit on it. The most positive thing for me was he was used in all sorts of ways. He's been the long down and distance back basically for 4 weeks. So he already had that. Mm-hmm. Which is hard to get. That means that coaches, trust him in pass protection. One of the harder things to do. But then all of his touches, all of his carries and everything went away. We were just like, okay, what the hell? And this last week, those things came back. So I think he's going to get the majority of the work inside the 5 like he has all year. He's going to continue to see the long down and distance work. He just needs to be, if he could be 50 to 60% of the attempts, he'll be fine. He can be a strong RB2 with RB1 upside every week. We're just going to have to see if they continue down this path this week. So I don't know what your thoughts are on the trust factor, but the underlying utilization was strong. It wasn't like, to your point, it was just some blowout where he got these random carries at the end of a game.
Right. They had to come back. Yeah. I mean, I start CEH in the Scott Fish Bowl, and I don't care. I don't even think about it. I put him in every single week, and it's paying off. Hey, you got to put him in. There's only so many running backs, and if there's 10 running backs, 9 of them suck. So hey, you got a guy, and he's in a good offense. Pray for the best. All right, everyone, Dwayne wants us to talk defenses, so let's talk some defense here in week 12. Here's a little secret, folks. Whoever the Philadelphia Eagles are playing, find that defense and play them. And that week, this week, it would be the Seattle Seahawks. Wentz is a turnover machine. He's going to throw an interception. He's probably going to fumble the ball. Lord knows Miles Sanders has a fumbling issue and will put it on the ground. So the Seahawks are a great option. Dwayne, any other thoughts? Some guys you see out there? Cowboys, Giants?
Dude, no, Seattle's been the team. If you're in a deep league where people make preemptive moves like the ones I play in, I picked up Seattle 2 weeks ago. I'm pretty much carrying them on every team. And it's because of the stretch right now. You get Philly, you get the Giants, you get the Jets, you get Washington.
Whew.
So that it doesn't get better than that, right? You get the Rams in week 16, which is that's tougher, but you get 4 out of 5 games with elite matchups against teams that turn the ball over. They're getting going now with their pass rush with Carlos Dunlap, so they're giving you more sacks. Jamal Adams is back healthy now, so they're attacking a little bit more. I think the Seahawks are in a great spot for the rest of the season. If you look at the Saints, not bad either. You get the Broncos. The Falcons can blow up on you any week. You don't know when, right? But you get the Falcons in week 13. Then you get the Eagles in week 14. But then you get the Chiefs and the Vikings. The Vikings don't drop back to pass unless, either they do drop back to pass, right? But they're pretty efficient with it. They're not one. You want to play your defense against other teams that are going to drop back, 40, 45 times a game, because that gives you chances for sacks. It gives you chances for picks. It gives you chances for pick six, right? Most of these defenses aren't going to shut the other team out. So once you're past those very few defenses that give you shutout potential, plus give you these other things, when you're looking at your matchups, I know it may seem counterintuitive, but you're really looking for them to be against teams that are forced to drop back and pass the ball a lot because they trail often. And the worse their quarterback is, the better, right? So don't come tell me, oh, well, I picked up the defense that was going to play Seattle. Like, there are exceptions to the rule. You don't want to play Russell Wilson. You don't want to play against Patrick Mahomes. There's some of these guys you don't want to play against. But overall, that's really, the rule. I'm just looking at it because I picked up Seattle so much. Cleveland was the other one that I picked up. Those are the two I'm carrying the most. And so Cleveland –
that was Denzel Ward now. Denzel Ward and I'm blanking on the –
Don't care. Here's all I care about. They play the Jets in week 16. They play the Giants in week 15. They play the Jaguars this week. Don't care. You and I could be starting at corner. I don't care.
I can run, so I'll play corner.
I would still be starting them. Now this week, Miles Garrett missing, that bothers me more. That's what bothers me more. But it's still the Jaguars, right? So that's the other team I'm carrying, and mainly I'm pairing those two together because when I get to week 16, especially in the formats I play in, where you're in these championship point races, for $500,000 and stuff, like I don't want to start Seattle against the Rams on week 16, so I'm carrying two defenses, and I really want to start Cleveland against the Jets. So that would be the other one. Those are the two I'm carrying. Like, I could pull up my teams right now and show people. I'm carrying those two teams or Miami on nearly every team. Those are my defenses. Unless I got a couple where I own the Ravens, right? I don't own the Steelers any. So unless I own the Ravens, I own one of those three defenses I just named out to you. There is one other one, but they're typically not available, and you got to get through week 13, but it would be the Rams because they get New England, who we've seen is very vulnerable. They get the Jets week 15. They do get the Cardinals on week 13, which will give up sacks, right? And so we've seen the Rams be able to put pressure on people. They can show up at times in the secondary. They don't let you run the ball. They basically force you to throw. Now, they can give up points, but the sacks are typically there.
And this week, too, the Giants are going to play at the Bengals, who are going to be starting Ryan Finley. So you're going to think, you're probably going to get a bunch of sacks and some turnovers there. And Alex Smith is taking 38 sacks a game. He's traded our 38 White Claws a week for 38 sacks a game. So Dallas, you tell me, you watch other games. I don't trust the Dallas defense. I don't really want to play them, but.
No, they're playing. They're playing hard, right? You do get Washington, you get Cincinnati, you get a beat down 49er team, you get the Eagles, you get the Giants. The problem with 49ers is if they can run it on you, they're just going to run it all day, right? So, and they could do that to Dallas. Yeah. The Eagles game, the Bengals game, and the Washington games are all fine. I mean, schedule-wise, they're in the top 5. They just don't have quite enough high enough pressure rate for me. Like, that's the other thing I look at. I look at pressure rates allowed versus pressure rates for. That's where, if you guys don't follow Brandon Thorne, like his article, like his stuff's amazing. It gives you all this stuff that we're talking about, right now. That's the main stuff that I look at over at Establish the Run. All right, you want to do questions rapid fire? Literally,
yeah.
I have to do like 2 or 3 word answers. I'm not going to explain anything. I'm just going to answer.
I will also say kickers matter, folks. I'm looking at Yahoo, and Jason Sanders, who's like the number 1 kicker in fantasy, is not even owned in 70% of leagues. Ryan Suckup, who is kicker 3, is owned in 50%. Daniel Carlson's not even owned in 50%. So get off of some of these BS kickers that you're hanging on to. Like Robbie Gould should not be held in leagues. Like, what are we doing here? So, kickers matter. So let me fire away here. Let's see. And then we're going to get out of here and let Dwayne go do his 300 waivers for the night. Boom. All right. Gus or Duke this week? This guy's just trolling you.
Gus or Duke? I am going with Duke.
Let's see. Would you trade James Conner for DeAndre Swift?
Yes. Easy.
Hollister or Disley rest of season?
Oh, my God. Disley. No confidence. Disley.
Would you play – okay, who do you would play at quarterback this week? Stafford against Houston or Taysom Hill at Denver?
Taysom Hill.
Rank these running back stashes. Pollard, Akers, Booker, and Tevin Coleman.
Pollard, then Booker, then Coleman, then Akers.
Deontay Johnson or Allen Robinson full PPR rest of
Deontay
season?
Johnson.
He's awesome. I actually traded Adam Thielen for him. Let's see.
I know that sounds weird and it was really quick, but he's got 10 targets 3 weeks in a row and he's got a quarterback. That's the main thing, right? Allen Robinson, poor guy. Like, he has the curse of not getting to play with any kind of quarterback. So prayers up to Allen Robinson that he eventually has a quarterback to play with. I would love to see it.
Fulgham, Josh Reynolds, or Deebo Samuel?
Deebo.
Let's see. A couple more here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Jonnu Smith, Dalton Schultz, Logan Thomas, all available. Thinking of grabbing one for week 12. Who do you pick?
Jonnu Smith.
Yeah,
Jonnu Smith just gives you the most upside. Make sure he's okay. I know he got dinged up in that game. He left the game. He came back in, but check the practice reports. All right,
PPR. Cooks at Detroit or Woods at San Francisco?
I'm going to go with Cooks. He's just, I know last week he only had 5 targets, but he's pretty much 9 to 10 targets every week. Whereas Woods, he can be in that 5 to 6 range. Now, he usually does get a carry or two. So, yeah, that is a tougher one. It really could go either way. But if I were in your shoes and I had to make the choice, I would pick Brandon Cooks. The cornerbacks for Detroit they're terrible. They're really struggling. And they play man. If you get bad cornerbacks that play man, like, there's nothing better. Literally, Houston is going to light Detroit up. Like, it's going to be like a Christmas tree a little early on Thanksgiving.
There you go. And you come home and you're off on the shelf is there. All right, last one here. Jordan Burkhardt wants to know, Dwayne, I got to sit one. Robert Woods, Allen Robinson, Will Fuller, or Tyler Lockett? This guy's got a good crew.
Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I had a guy ask me that.
It's a quarterback thing, man. It's a quarterback thing.
There it is. Folks, we thank you for hanging out with us and subscribing to that YouTube channel. We did hit 1,000 subscribers, and it's all thanks to you folks, staying with us, asking us questions, and, enjoying the content here. We hope to give you even more as the months and years go on. So if you haven't liked the show, if you're watching on YouTube, please do so. Leave a comment. Let us know what your favorite Thanksgiving side is and, all that good stuff. And we want to hear how your teams do. Stay close at FF Hustle. Watch for the merch, and have a great Thanksgiving. There's a lot going on in the world, good, bad, and different. Just take a minute, sit back with your wife, your kids, your mistress, whoever you're hanging out with that day, crack a beer, and, just never get out hustled. Enjoy yourself, folks. We'll see you. Take it easy, Dwayne. Have a good Thanksgiving, my friend.
You too, man. Thanks.